Hello.
Our story begins with shock, a split-second decision that altered the fate of history forever. Mace Windu, after having defeated the Sith Lord in a fair fight, prepared to end the legacy of the Sith. With Maul captured on Mandalore, Dooku dead over Coruscant, and Grievous destroyed, this was the moment to end it all. Everyone with the power to do their duty had done it, and now it was Mace's turn to fulfill his part. It didn't matter if the Jedi way was peace and justice. Sidious had killed billions of lives by manipulating the war into happening, and Mace wholeheartedly believed that. When he swung his saber down over his head, Anakin Skywalker, the same person who had just betrayed the Sith by exposing them, turned on Windu, sending it and the Jedi weapon out of the open window. Palpatine couldn't believe it. Everything transpired in slow motion. For Sidious, he recognized that Skywalker had finally been seduced. He did it. With a moment of recognition, he raised his hands and prepared to launch the Master of the Order out of the window. Anakin, though, while Mace screamed in both agony, shock, and disappointment, had his own collection of thoughts. He knew he made the wrong choice. Something deep within his soul told him that betraying Windu would not bring him any resolution, only more pain. Instead of using this moment to crown himself as champion of the Jedi Order by betraying Palpatine too, he stood by the Jedi Master. Anakin rolled his wrist around and evenly spread it across his torso, just in time to block a lightning blast from the Sith Lord aimed at the Jedi Master. Mace braced himself before looking to another location to find a weapon. Kit Fisto's saber sat still on the other side of the room, waiting to be taken. As blue electricity covered the executive office, Mace pulled Fisto's weapon with force to his still open hand and sheathed it on the back of his belt, so that it could be hidden by his robes. Palpatine was blasted back into the wall, with the burning light scarring his skin further. Anakin demanded that Palpatine stop, but he couldn't. It wasn't just for shock value. Firing electricity at a lightsaber was like grabbing an electrical wire. The burning forced him to react by gripping the attack harder. When he released, he rolled backwards, dramatically. Anakin demanded both of their attention, and made it clear that he had once. Before the Sith or Jedi could or should be destroyed, he needed both of them. Anakin, in his moment of betrayal, recognized that he needed Mace Windu alive. Whether Mace knew the secrets of immortality or not did not matter. He was like a buffer. Someone Anakin planned on sacrificing if Palpatine became too powerful for him to handle. He told the two of them to follow along with him. Sidious tried to play the victim, and Mace balled his free hand into a fist while looking at his missing appendage. He didn't say anything. He just wore an exhausted scowl. The war had taken so much from them. Everyone had done their jobs. It was so close to completion. Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and yeah, Anakin too, had done their jobs, and then Skywalker decided he couldn't leave well enough alone. It was distressing more than anything, because everything hung in the balance until either Palpatine died or Mace did something about it. He patiently waited as Skywalker forced the Chancellor to his feet. Anakin wasn't super concerned with Windu. He kept his eye on him, but he knew that Mace didn't have a weapon. He wasn't a threat in Skywalker's eyes. The Jedi Knight, once Palpatine got up, demanded to know the location of his secret lair, assuming that the Sith had a location that they called home. Palpatine spat back. Why would he tell Anakin about his lair? Skywalker tried to show his threatening demeanor by telling Sidious that he needed something from him. A smile drew itself slowly across the Sith Lord's face, and he turned to Master Windu, asking him if he had time for a tale. The Jedi Master tilted his head back and looked around Anakin at Palpatine. Skywalker tried to interrupt, but Sidious was too quick and precise with his words, asking if Mace was familiar with the tale of Anakin's and Padme's conjugality. Windu turned his head, and Anakin's face became visibly flustered. There were spots of red and his brow creased. He pushed Palpatine and then tried to push Windu towards the exit. Eventually, the two Masters of Light and Dark were walking side by side, avoiding any Senate guards and walking towards a shuttle on the landing platforms. Once inside, the location of the works would be revealed, and Skywalker forced the two of them to pilot towards the location together, because he needed to be ready with his lightsaber in case they tried anything. It was a very quiet journey across the city. Palpatine let the idea of marriage linger on Mace's mind throughout their entire trip, because it could potentially fuel frustration. Sidious understood his predicament. Even if Mace was pissed off at Skywalker, he would still go out of his way to make sure Palpatine died. Windu was a Jedi Master. His duty was to the Republic. His only mission was ensuring that the Sith died. It was abundantly clear that Sidious was the odd man out, so he needed to find a way to make sure the odds were in his favor, despite that definitely not being the case in this moment. Before they arrived, the galaxy remained still. Battles still waged across the stars. Aayla Secura and the 327th prepared for their engagement on Felucia. Kenobi returned to combat with the 212th on Utapau. Caleb Doom joined the Bad Batch on Kaller. Plo Koon and the Wolfpack finished up with their triumph over Caden and Modia. Those who were in the middle of their own sieges, like Yoda and Luminara on Kashyyyk, continued with ease. The clones remained unaffected. The order that would have changed everything never came. The war continued between battle droids and clone troopers. There were no swift actions that offset the balance of the Force or the direction of the Republic. It was all still, just as it was for Ahsoka Tano inside the bridge of the Venator she traveled within. She reflected on the war with her friend, now Commander, Rex. They had very different perspectives on the conflict. She was even considering a return to the Jedi Order, and she said that to him in this moment. Ahsoka didn't really want to return to the Jedi though. They had taught her one thing, but practiced another. It was abundantly clear with so many, most notably General Krell and Umbara and her own very best friend, Barriss Offee, that the teachings of peace were outweighed by conflict. Ahsoka took the war personally, and she expressed to Rex that she hoped that with Maul's capture, the war would finally come to an end. This did give her time to learn about General Grievous's defeat on Utapau, something that brought her profound comfort. Inside the eerie and dark works, the Sith and two Jedi walked from the shuttle. Palpatine knew what Anakin wanted. Skywalker was just trying to figure out how to explain these things to Mace. They had to work together to get to the bottom of these secrets. The Jedi Master of the Order remained patient. He used the voyage from the executive building to the industrial sector to reflect on his own actions. He shared no regret for bashing Anakin in front of the council. Clearly, it was not harsh enough. He did, though, regret not pacing himself on his move to apprehend Palpatine. However, he also recognized how imperative it was for him to stop the war. So much was at play, especially with the Sith Lord in control of the Republic. Mace only shared such regrets because he didn't know about Order 66, and to that point, how could he know about it? All Mace knew was that Skywalker was the only individual that stopped him from finishing this war. If he had only given Anakin an assignment, or told someone else like Sin Dralek to keep an eye on him, all of this could have been avoided. Once they walked into the altar chamber, Sidious turned around and looked at Anakin, telling him that he was a fool for bringing him back to his own lair. Palpatine, completely understanding that he could be killed here, ripped his hand outwards, pulling towards him Lord Plagueis' lightsaber. It was a trophy, something he kept inside the altar room to add an extra boost of darkness. Like most Sith, Plagueis' spirit was connected to an artifact of personal importance. Because his former master remained spiritually locked into the saber, its presence inside this chamber helped the Sith utilize the dark side more efficiently. Only pain was held inside Plagueis' weapon, fueling the darkness with greater ease for Sidious and, at one point or another, Tyrannus too. Anakin, seeing this action from Palpatine, swung his saber upwards from his hip. Like he did with Windu, he cut off part of Palpatine's arm, though this cut much deeper. It started just below the elbow, forcing Sidious to fall back in pain. Plagueis' weapon was cut in half, leaving nothing but a hiss of air in its destruction. The trophy, and thus the soul of the old master, was gone. He looked at Anakin, who stood above him, and Windu, who quietly observed from behind. Skywalker told the Sith Lord to get a grip. They had more pressing matters to attend to. This prompted Mace to ask why they were here. Surely Anakin had a reason for bringing them to the Sith altar, and also what did it have to do with Padme Amidala? Anakin turned back and told Windu that he'd been experiencing visions. He saw the death of his wife because she was pregnant. Mace's face did not change. He simply nodded before turning to Palpatine and telling him to get a grip. Anakin had a vision. Skywalker didn't pick up on the backhanded nature of this comment because of his desperation, but Sidious did, and he was amused by it. The truth is, too, Mace could very easily put Anakin at ease, but he had no problem wasting all of their time. He knew that Plo Koon or Yoda would be back soon. Ahsoka would return with Maul. All of it was coming together at once. There was no problem with having a sleepover in the Sith hideout. Their conversations about immortality, the promises and powers of Plagueis the Wise, plus some alternative discussions about Jedi and Sith lore, filled the next few hours. There were basic and even fundamental disagreements. Palpatine was absolutely sure that one could save someone else from death, because Plagueis had done it, and Mace knew that it took one soul for another soul to live. The truth is, though, both were technically right. Through darkness, an individual like Plagueis could take someone's life to save someone else's. Typically, and this is what Palpatine avoided that Mace addressed, is that it had to be done individually. A Sith using this power had to drain the life of another to gain that power and that life force. Sidious did not want to say this because he knew that Padme did not have the capability nor the desire to drain someone else's life to protect her own. Windu added more confusion to the conversation because, well, why wouldn't Palpatine address the real way it worked? Surely he wouldn't hide anything from Anakin. A Sith lying? Why would they do that? They would never do that. Mace, because he knew they had time, played a very petty strategy. He wanted to rub Anakin's ignorance back in his face. It was beyond foolish to trust a Sith. Even if it were desperation, they did nothing but take. All they had ever done in Anakin's own life was promise lies and steal from him, whether it be Dooku taking his forearm, Maul killing Qui-Gon, or any number of crimes he had to endure during the war because of Sidious. Maybe it was immature, but so be it. Skywalker needed to learn one way or another. So with Palpatine constantly trying to give a formula only his master understood, Mace spoke of a Jedi legend. Whether or not it was true was up to Anakin to decide. The old lore went that in the early days of the Jedi Order, when their centralized sect wasn't much larger than 400 members, there was a master. Someone who had formed attachments. Someone that, like Anakin, had visions of losing another they cared about. The Jedi Master worked day and night to find a solution to this prophesized death, but it was impossible. The ancient Jedi Master tried to protect the person by forcing themselves into a sedated state. Through completely harmonizing with the Force, the individual found a pathway called soulwalking. It was similar to how a dyad in the Force worked, but without the dyad part. Essentially, the soul-walking power allowed the individual to match with their intended target, and through rigorous meditative sessions, search for the cure. Typically, this worked if there were internal diseases that couldn't be found. For individuals that experienced external death from the outside world, this soul-walking provided avenues to avoiding scenarios where this future death transpired. Anakin demanded to know how to do it, or the information on the holocron. Mace, smugly that is, told Skywalker that the Jedi didn't have the holocron on it anymore. Anakin cried out, demanding to know why, and the Jedi Master explained, no need. Generations after soul walking was created, it was manipulated by an individual who craved power over the Force. It's after all why the Jedi have an attachment rule. It's not that the Jedi can't feel love or hold attachment, but individuals who have unhealthy boundaries often to struggle to let go when they need to. Doesn't matter if the attached individual will die or not, the inability to let go caused a great many problems. He then gestured at the Sith Lord, and then to his own hand. See? A Sith who tried to have, well, Mace decided openly and audibly that he'd allow Anakin to finish the rest of the cipher. Skywalker was too focused on one thing rather than the other being the whole pie. Anakin wanted to understand soulwalking, not the fact that these visions likely came from Palpatine. It wasn't exactly a hard riddle to put together either. Mace had figured it out during their discussion, that Palpatine was likely involved in some way or another. Clearly, and this is what Windu was about to say to Anakin, if Palpatine was the Sith Lord and Dooku was Tyrannus, that would mean that Dooku was Palpatine's student. By PEMDAS logic, Palpatine ordered Dooku to kill Padme not just once but several times. The one person closer to Anakin than anyone else in the galaxy was, well, Padme. But because Anakin wanted the answer to some mystical power he'd just heard of, he never got to the point of figuring out the truth about his friend Palpatine. As a result, he asked Mace on how to achieve the power of soulwalking, and Windu explained that it couldn't just be learned overnight. The dark side might offer alternatives, but they were far weaker and took less time because they offered short-term results but long-term failure. If Anakin truly wanted to soulwalk, like the ancients, then he needed to have taken his Jedi training seriously a decade earlier. His instructors told him to use the Force with patience, dedication, and serenity. He showed no signs of doing that in his young adult life. Palpatine, despite wanting Anakin on his side, also realized that by confusing Skywalker mid-conversation, he had a better chance of making it out of here alive, so he tried to throw a few more curveballs into the discussion, partially siding with Mace, that if Anakin had taken his studies more seriously, then he wouldn't have a hard time with mastering Plagueis' work either. It all went back to his early days, and Skywalker's head began to spin. Both masters, regardless of side, were telling him that he should have taken his studying more seriously. Anakin wanted certain answers, not confusion. But like Mace said, in Palpatine's own words, if Anakin wanted to save Padme, he needed to focus on his dedication to the Force. Soulwalking and immortality couldn't be earned with the lightsaber. It had to be done with immense concentration. All of these words, points of view, and even the agreement shared between Jedi and Sith broke Skywalker. He eventually fell backwards and leaned against the altar, wiping tears from his eyes. His actions failed Padme. He hadn't put it together that she could still be saved if he just killed Palpatine, but he focused on what they were both speaking about. If Anakin had taken his studies seriously and used his Force-given powers from an early age, he wouldn't be struggling right now. He could be soul-walking with Padme and saving her from certain death that Palpatine spoke of. He covered his face to wipe tears away before anger drew itself across his mind. If discussion would not bring him resolution, he would have to force it. The amusement mutually shared between Windu and Palpatine quickly disappeared when Anakin's saber ignited. Across the city, in the middle of the night, chaos was rushing through the executive building. Shaak Ti and Coleman Kaj were joining Commander Fox to look for the missing Chancellor and 2 Jedi. No one saw the duel between Palpatine and the Jedi. They only saw the security footage of Skywalker escorting them out of the building. Additionally, Fisto's lightsaber was missing, which the Jedi found to be peculiar. The question wasn't if Anakin had captured them, it was more of a question of, what were they running from? No one, not even Commander Fox, thought that the Republic hero Anakin Skywalker attacked the Jedi and the Chancellor. It sounded out of character for him in their minds, so their investigation swirled around who may have broken into the office, killed 3 Jedi, and forced 2 others to run. Not far from the Executive Plaza, Ahsoka and Rex arrived at the Jedi Temple to greet Sindralik. Maul was taken into the ancient structure, and Ahsoka asked about the whereabouts of her instructor. He didn't know all the details, but Sin told her and Rex that it was unclear. He knew she was a citizen, but this was a conversation about her former master, so he agreed to tell her what little he knew. Essentially, it was what everyone else knew. Skywalker was seen escorting an injured Mace Windu and a visibly scarred Chancellor Palpatine out of the executive building. Where they went remained the question. Ahsoka asked if she and the men of the 332nd could begin searching for them, and Sindralik said, well, why not? They realistically should, because it'd be good for someone to try and find them. Anakin shoved his lightsaber towards Windu's face and demanded more clairvoyance. He couldn't do this without some guidance. Then of course, Sidious egged him on. Mace just looked at Anakin asking if this wasn't the Jedi way. He clearly didn't think so when Mace was doing it. Anakin tried not to think about what he had done to Dooku, but he needed answers. The time was ticking down, and there were still answers that he had to get a hold of that he didn't have. Mace asked Skywalker if he saw his demeanor. Anakin studied the Jedi Master for a moment before asking why. Windu explained that he was experiencing peace and serenity right in this instant. He was connecting to the Force. If he had the talents of the Ancients himself, surely he could experience soulwalking too. Perhaps even save Anakin from himself. That didn't really make Skywalker any happier, but that wasn't the point. Even if the two masters had been rage-baiting Anakin for several hours, in hopes that he might kill the other out of pure spite, Mace wasn't even trying to piss him off with this. He meant it, because Anakin was damning himself, and someone that Mace cared about, to potential deaths due to sheer immaturity. Padme didn't deserve this. Mace told Anakin to step back and meditate, to feel the Force and find his visions. Anakin didn't have time for this and frustratedly swung his saber away from Mace. This was stupid. It was wasting his time. Windu told Anakin that if he dug into his visions, he could find their origin. It was no surprise that everything was coming together at once. Palpatine scowled at the Jedi Master, seeing what he was doing after this long drawn-out period. And Mace added to it, just for fun. If Anakin couldn't get to the bottom of this secret vision, then he could kill him right here and right now. Skywalker's eyes shifted to Palpatine, who gave him a gaze of approval. It was like Anakin had already made up his mind in who he actually wanted to trust, regardless of what they did. Mace put two and two together during this period of time. He understood what was happening here. He was the odd one out. Only Skywalker would break himself out of this, and he would trust the Sith over a Jedi for whatever reason. Mace couldn't control that. Anakin, as instructed, sat down across from the two of them and closed his eyes. Mace walked him through the instructional meditation. Anakin should be searching for a source of these visions. If they came from the Force itself, as all true and real Force visions do, then they will feel natural. But if you find a source, if there is someone putting those visions into your mind, then there will be breaches. Anakin asked how to identify these breaches, and the Jedi Master explained that they were like portals, something like the Maul. They'd mimic black holes. Everything in our understanding of life comes from our understanding in the universe. The Force would not reward visions that came unnaturally. It would thus, as a result of not being a product of the Force, make the visions appear unnatural in some form. Anakin asked what would happen if he couldn't find the visions. Mace explained that they weren't real in the slightest then. It would be proof that he'd been misled by a lie. Windu turned to Sidious and mouthed the words, "I dare you." This came off as both a threat and a challenge. Sidious wasn't really sure what Mace was expecting, and the truth is, the Sith Lord was in a bind. If he forced the visions onto Anakin right now, he would see the portals that Mace spoke of within his mind's eye. It's why putting visions into a Jedi Knight was significantly easier than a Jedi Master. Someone of Obi-Wan's or Yoda's experience would see these visions as deception. Anakin, though, would rush towards the emotional sensations he felt. Again, a reason for the attachment rule. Sidious could either force these visions into Anakin's head, which would reveal that he was being deceived. He could do nothing, proving again that it was a trick, or he could find his own way out of this. Luckily, a deep meditation might take some time for Anakin, so he had some room for scheming inside of his own dark lair. For 30 minutes, there would be silent scheming. Palpatine was using his still remaining hand to try and create a burst of light in the altar behind Anakin. It would provide Palpatine with more control over the environment, perhaps tricking Skywalker into believing that the Jedi were using these visions to hurt him. Mace, though, was still as a statue. His hand and wrist were sitting on his lap. he remained patient. It was funny. The tale of the ancient Jedi he told was actually a truth. Soulwalking was real, and it brought him peace just knowing that the Order had such magnificent traditions. He opened his eyes and looked at Skywalker. He allowed the Sith to continue focusing on the unlit fire. Sidious was trying so hard too. So pathetic. With Anakin sensing the catch, he started to chase. The vision was real. He wasn't just imagining it. It had to have come from the Force. The altar behind Skywalker started to burst with tiny blue flames. Anakin believed that the Force was telling him something about Padme, that she was actually going to die. Just as he chased the rabbit, Palpatine pulled Skywalker's saber into his hand. Mace ignited Fisto's saber and swept right across Palpatine's wrist, and in the same swing he removed his head. Mace spun around and turned towards Anakin, who, after chasing the vision, lost its trail. The black holes he saw inside of his head just disappeared. The blue flame behind him died out with Palpatine's last breath, and Anakin looked for a sign that what he saw was real. Windu rolled the weapon of Fisto around towards Anakin's neck, and told Skywalker to wake up. Once his eyes opened, he saw a dead Palpatine and a green hue of a saber that he did not recognize. How did Windu get that? Mace leaned down and asked Skywalker if the vision was real or not, and he shook his head. It was all fabricated by someone. Mace gestured to the body of the dead Chancellor. Pretty damn clear who created it. He shoved the weapon closer to Anakin's neck and told him that he'd be wiser to remember a Jedi does not kill an unarmed innocent. That method did not apply for a Sith. He pulled the weapon back, deconstructing the hilt and taking Fisto's crystal, before dropping all the pieces of the saber and stepping away. Anakin thought on Dooku's death, then on what Mace attempted to do to Palpatine, which was in essence the same thing. These two were not innocent people. Mace didn't kill Skywalker because, aside from the minor offense of taking his hand, he was not a Sith, nor technically a bad person. Though all the trust that had been finally gained between Jedi Knight and Master of the Order was lost. Mace had a decision to make about Anakin's future inside the Order. But first, he needed to clean up the mess. Luckily though, because of how everything happened with the investigation, Mace could inform people of the truth. The assault on the Chancellor's office came from Magna Guards, attempting to kill Palpatine after Dooku's death. It was a surprise attack. He claimed that General Skywalker helped them escape, but sadly, the damage done to the Chancellor was too much. He died. The Jedi decided to ceremonially handle the passing, because sadly, Palpatine had been too badly deformed, and he told them that he didn't want the people to see him in such a condition. The Jedi honored Palpatine's final words by transforming him into a kyber crystal. In this, Mace Windu displayed to investigators the crystal of Kit Fisto, and told the people that they were going to immortalize the Chancellor for all the good he did to the galaxy. The kyber crystal, as a result, wouldn't just lie in state for people to visit, believing it was Palpatine's entire essence, but it would remain inside the executive building as the eternal light of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Go figure, a Sith Lord forever remembered as a hero and martyr, represented by the kyber crystal of a Jedi Master. It was Mace's way of making sure Sidious rolled in his purgatory for the rest of eternity. Skywalker, on the other hand, was forced to find his own transportation away from the industrial sector, because Mace left before he could ever get in the vessel. Windu was so irritated, and Anakin simply returned to Padme. He didn't talk about the evening, he didn't cry over Palpatine's death, and he did not return to the Jedi Temple. His lightsaber had been destroyed, his sense of control over himself vulnerable, and his heart yearning for forgiveness. Not from anyone else, but actually from himself. As Mace had shown him, the visions were gone when he slept that night. He didn't even sleep through the night, but through half of the day too. He was crushed by his own actions, and couldn't stop thinking about betraying Windu. It all could have been avoided. His guilt would be made worse when he spoke to Obi-Wan after the entire ordeal. Mace Windu had decided to forgive Anakin for everything, but the Council did not. They voted almost unanimously to remove him from the Jedi Order for protecting a Sith Lord. Mace was not punished for trying to execute Palpatine and then actually doing so. They needed the Sith Lord to die, and while it was a point of discussion about how Skywalker's actions made the whole public outlook on the event easier, because it didn't look like the Jedi assassinated Palpatine, it wasn't enough for the Council to rationalize keeping him around. He was too unhinged. Despite being disappointed, Anakin wasn't really upset. He, Padme, and even Ahsoka would depart from Coruscant to stay on Naboo, where they would live for the next few months. It was, in his opinion, the best thing ever. Skywalker later would reflect on this moment as the day everything changed for him for the better. Because he tried to hold both the relationship and his connection to the Jedi Order, he ended up hurting himself and those around him. That wasn't productive or healthy, and it wasn't a good relationship for him to have with either. The Jedi didn't allow attachment, and he had a very deep and, at that, unhealthy one. Being away from the Order allowed him to healthily develop that relationship with Padme, and then the twins. It would be on Naboo that Anakin would practice the concept of soulwalking, something he wanted to learn to protect those around him. He was still traumatized by the incident on Tatooine with Shmi, and refused to ever let it happen again. Now that the Sith were gone, though, there would be no other individual to try and hurt him with Force visions. He could be prepared and learn how to soulwalk to keep those he cared about safe, in a healthy and mature way. He loved being a Jedi, but this was the best path for him. A return to mechanics also brought him extreme happiness, not to mention his continuously evolving relationship with his little sister, Ahsoka. Outside of Naboo, the galaxy would react to the changing of the war. Mace would receive his new hand, and lead the Republic into the last few victories in conflict. The capture of the CIS Council would take years to complete, but the Central War would be done within the first few weeks after Palpatine's death. The Republic never suspected the Jedi of any malpractice. Yoda, after Kashyyyk, stepped down and handed the reins of Grand Master to Windu. He would honor the choice, but focus on ending the war instead, as well as bringing continued peace to the Force. Without the Jedi holding a massive target on their back, they could position themselves in the public eye favorably again. It would work for them too. Eventually, Mace would visit Senator Amidala, the twins, and Anakin on Naboo. It would actually be a good reunion, where their differences could be set aside. With the tension of the night Palpatine died along behind them, there was a chance for Anakin to have a fresh start if he wanted. Despite the Order's decision to remove him, Mace opened the avenue back up, on the off chance that he might want to join, or if his children might want to as well. It was something the Council was ready to try, now that there had been some new changes to the Order without Yoda presiding over the Council. It would leave a difficult decision for both Anakin and Padme, but since the Jedi were trying something new, why not? Anakin, Luke, and Leia would become official Jedi, Skywalker becoming a master. They wouldn't leave Padme though. Whenever she was on Coruscant or Naboo, they'd be there too. And despite some pushback on the idea from the Council initially, it would end up transforming how the Order viewed attachment in a new age of true balance in the Force. And that, my friends, is Rage Baiting Anakin Skywalker 101. Special thanks to the patrons for supporting the channel. Smash the like button. Let's talk about this story. So, I did a story a while back. It was what if Dooku defeated Anakin in the Invisible Hand, and it basically is a story where it was very experimental, and this one is too. That specific story was experimental because it was Palpatine, Obi-Wan, Anakin in a cell, and then Dooku was kind of like looking over them, like, ooh, don't you do that, you're not allowed to do that. And this story is kind of that, where Anakin defeats Windu, technically speaking, and he is technically the victor. He doesn't want to kill Windu, and so that's kind of his motivation, is he's cutting off Windu's hand because he quote-unquote needs Palpatine, but he doesn't know if he needs Windu or not either, and Windu is probably the most experienced Jedi on Coruscant. So his action to save them is to learn something from both of them and hopefully come to the right answer. and that's why he takes the idea of holding them hostage. Now, the whole situation inside the lair, which is really the bulk of this story, I really wanted it to be the two masters kind of realizing that they're kind of stuck in this predicament and trying to play with Anakin's favor while also trying to get the other one killed by making Skywalker snap again. Because they both saw him snap on Windu, and they're kind of like making a game out of it, because you can't do anything, as I say in the story, or technically Mace says in the story. The Jedi have won the war. If the Sith Lord is currently stuck inside the works, then there's nothing they have to worry about, and that's his main focus, is that he can do whatever he wants, and so if he dies, he dies, but at the end of the day, if he dies with Palpatine. He's going to make sure Palpatine dies with him, and that's all that matters to him. He doesn't really care about what Anakin wants in this scenario, and yeah, it does end up devolving into just the two of them rage baiting him, trying to make him kill the other. I also think in the end, despite the distrust that Mace has for Anakin, which is pretty validated based on his actions, I think in the end, I think he wouldn't try and kill Anakin. I think he'd be just kind of annoyed, like, really? We had to do all that just for nothing to change, basically? So, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always, my friends, may the Force be with you.